powered by the Inside the Birds podcast. Now, live from inside the Matt Black Kia Studios, this is Football at 4.
Football at 4 is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at the Wild Wild West, Tropicana, Harrah's Resort, Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. I'm Mike Gill. This is the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast getting us ready for tonight's tilt between the Eagles and, of course, the Dallas Cowboys. It's a big one in the NFC East. I got a couple of little stat lines on this game. It's the 27th time the two teams will meet in primetime since the merger, tied with the Raiders and Chargers for most in that span. It's the first meeting on Monday Night Football. Believe it or not, these two teams have not played on Monday Night Football since 2008. That was the game Deshaun Jackson dropped the ball before the goal line on that bomb from Donovan McNabb. It's the Cowboys' 83rd game on Monday night, second most all time. The Cowboys have lost 7 straight primetime games. It's the second longest active streak. And that's where we bring in Geoff Mosher from the Inside the Birds podcast, who joins us right now here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. Mosh, Monday Night Football. I did not realize these two teams have not played on Monday night since 2008.
Yeah, that is amazing. It feels like they've played on primetime, I guess, Sunday night a billion times since then. But I remember that game that you referenced. I was there. Deshaun Jackson, famous for sort of thinking he caught a touchdown, then, spiking the ball a little bit too early there and keeping the Eagles from scoring a touchdown at that moment.
Yeah, so let's get into some of the particulars of tonight's game. And number one, we know that Jordan Mailata is not going to play in the game, and obviously that means Andre Dillard will get the start. What is your expectations? What do the team expect from Dillard? And there's a lot of underlining stories. There's a lot of peels to the onion on this one.
Yeah, there is. It's kind of funny. It's hard not to think. When we hear about a primetime game against a division opponent where the left tackle is not going to be starting, it's hard not to remember that Eagles-Giants game in 2006 when Trey Thomas had to miss it and Winston Justice filled in. But it's not – I mean, you can say that's just one time, but it's not hard to see the parallels between Winston Justice, who was kind of considered timid at the time, maybe not a little bit ready, didn't have that toughness that a John Runyon or a Trey Thomas were known to have. And obviously that's been the issue for Andre Dillard ever since he's gotten here, is just not having that mean streak and being able to really hold off those big, powerful rushers at that left tackle position. He's got wonderful feet, has nice pass pro against kind of your speed rushers, but the guys who are big and just want to get right into his chest, he struggles with. And then, of course, the injuries that he's had has really, limited his playing time. So this will be a big test for him.
Yeah, and then, Moshe, of course, the other underlining thing here is the positive that can come from this. What if he plays well? The Eagles already have a, treasure chest full of draft picks. But if he plays well, I guess the phone could start ringing and people wondering, hey, is Andre Dillard available?
It's possible. You might hear that. We can talk about that after the game and see what happens. I would say, though, that with Jordan Mailata, first of all, there's no guarantee he's going to be back next week for Sunday's game against the Kansas City Chiefs. And you are talking about a left tackle who hasn't played this position very long and has had 2 back injuries earlier in his career. So having a good, adequate backup left tackle may be a nice thing to have, and you may not just want to go run out to the market and dangle him out there for whatever pick, unless you get an offer that you just can't refuse.
Moshe, obviously the Eagles are going to go with 2 backup offensive linemen here. So let's analyze that. Micah Parsons' role tonight and the Eagles being down 2 starting offensive linemen. How do we look at how that matchup will impact tonight's game?
Yeah, it's certainly the big question mark that the Eagles have. They have 2 questions as far as injuries going into this game. How can they hold up on the offensive line? And sort of in the same vein, how will the defensive line be impacted by no Brandon Graham, which is, it's hard to believe it, but it's been a long, long time since Brandon Graham didn't start a game because he was injured. So those are the 2. That's where the spotlight is. If the Eagles control the trenches, like most teams, they'll do a good job. But obviously that's the obstacle that's presented. I will say for the Eagles offensive line, they catch a little bit of a break in that Dallas's defensive line is really banged up. Of course, there's no DeMarcus Lawrence. There's also no Bradley Anae. They're missing a couple of other defensive linemen that they would normally have. They're not deep on the defensive line. So if Landon Dickerson, who's going to start right guard for Brandon Brooks, had a good week of practice and now he gets to start and not get thrown in the middle of a game, if he's 45 to 55% better than what you saw against San Francisco, that's a really big feather in the cap for the Eagles.
No doubt about it. And obviously, the Dallas defense last year, Moach, was a disaster. They played much better last week against a pretty good Chargers team. I mean, they gave up 17 points to a Charger team that just went to Kansas City and pulled off a road win here. So what has improved about the Dallas defense?
I don't know if it's too early to say what's improved or whether that was kind of just an anomaly type game last week. But I will say they are playing a lot more man defense, which is, I think, surprising for a lot of people because Dan Quinn, going back to his days in Atlanta, was playing a lot more zone, even more some cover three. Obviously, the cover three was the Legion of Boom, who was out there in Seattle. So he's playing more man defense. And I would say Trayvon Diggs, their cornerback from Alabama, has had a much better start to his year now than his rookie year last year when there were just deep plays against them all over the field. He actually had a pretty good November and December last year, but kind of got lost in the sauce of Dallas just not being a very good team and having a lot of injuries. But he's starting off good, and he's been the corner that they would hope that he would be, and so he'll be a matchup for the Eagles rookie Devontae Smith, his former teammate. A lot of Alabama on the field tonight, by the way.
Yeah, well, last week we talked a lot about, all the deep shots they took down the field. Let me ask you, is this a team that is vulnerable to the deep shot?
That's a good question. I mean, if they're going to play man defense, then, yeah, there should be opportunities to get your ball down the field and take advantage of some one-on-ones that you're going to see in the secondary. So, but we talk about the Eagles receivers. I mean, they're still, to me, a work in progress. Devontae Smith was targeted, 7 times last week, and he only caught 2 balls. And I feel like this coaching staff is still trying to figure out how to use Jalen Reagor the right way. Maybe they watched what Deebo Samuel did for the Niners last night. Maybe got some ideas because I feel like they're similar kind of skill set players where you move them around and you just figure out different ways to put the ball in the hands. And the same thing with Watkins. He's not exactly a full route tree polished wideout. He's a deep threat. So I think that, to me, you're still in week 3. You're getting your identity. The ball's got to go to your playmakers. That's what they didn't do last year. It's got to go to Dallas Goedert tonight. It's got to get in the hands of Miles Sanders in a variety of ways as a runner and a receiver, and it's got to get to Devontae Smith too.
Yeah, and then last week we talked, let's first off, Zach Ertz will play tonight, correct?
Yeah, he should. I don't see why he wouldn't. He's off the
right. He's off the
COVID list.
Yeah. So, and then we talked a little bit about it during the last week, Moshe. But how can the Eagles? And I think Shane Steichen admitted, we got to figure out a way to get those guys more involved. But is that a key for tonight's game? Is getting those guys more involved? Yeah,
the key to me, Mike, is it's just figuring out how to make sure that you're not using Zach Ertz as only a receiver and that Dallas Goedert is only a blocker. Because Goddard's a good tight end, and he should be the number 1 tight end on this team right now. And he's not getting that kind of opportunities. And it's not just about ego. It's about what he can do for this offense. So he can beat one-on-one matchups. He's tailor-made for that. He has that yard after the catch or run after the catch ability. And to only have 2 or 3 targets would be negligence and malpractice on the Eagles' part. They've got to get him involved in the game. He historically plays well against the Cowboys, but more than that, he's probably – you could say he's your most dependable receiver, pass catcher right now because he's most experienced. But I don't know that he's more talented than, say, Devontae Smith overall. But right now, he is the guy who you want to rely on the most.
There's no question. I'm very intrigued to see because what did Sirianni say? That he really drug himself through the mud, right, Moshe? In kind of self-scouting himself. So what did he learn from game 1 and then the mistakes in game 2 and how he kind of morphs them together? You wonder if morphing the mistakes and the things that he did well is a good enough game plan to beat this Dallas team. Do you look at Dallas and say, no way, man, this is head and shoulders a more talented team than Philadelphia?
I think that in certain regards they are. I mean, as far as offensive firepower right now, they've got a lot more proven, and they can beat you in a variety of different ways. There are guys that you want to put the ball in the hands of on the Cowboys that you're just pretty certain if you do, you're going to get great production. I think you're still wondering about a lot of those guys on the Eagles as they are young and progressing. But I think the most important thing that Nick Sirianni said, along with dragging himself through the mud, was that he's got to remember sometimes it's about players, not necessarily play calls. And I interpret that to mean is, yeah, your scheme is one thing, but at the end of the day, the guys who are going to execute your scheme are your best playmakers. And if Goddard and Sanders and Devontae Smith aren't the ones touching the ball frequently, or Jalen Reagor, depending on how the matchups are, then you're doing a disservice to yourself and your scheme.
But when you said that, I think you brought that up last week, and he said it. I said, well, then he didn't listen to himself because it seemed like he went with play calling over players. He decided, I want to call this play, and didn't go with the strength of his team in that game last week.
Yeah, he said that, and we can judge him off what he said. And obviously, our eyes told us that there seemed to be some play calls in that game against the Niners that just don't make sense, or just a flow that didn't feel right, and the ball not getting to the guys that you would normally expect. But also, we need to understand is that we don't know what those play calls are. And tonight's another example, another game where we find out if things don't go well, if that's really on the play caller or the person pulling the trigger. There's a data out there that shows from NextGen that shows that 66% of Jalen Hurts' throws beyond the line of scrimmage are to the right side. I mean, that's fairly telltale right there. I mean, defense, they get paid, they get all the data, they get all the analytics. So to me, the question is that because that's the way it's always schemed up, or is that Jalen Hurts' comfort zone? And why is his comfort zone not around the middle or left side? Why is it in just this kind of one area that now limits you as an offensive weapon?
Let's talk defense here, Moshe, because obviously they're going to have their hands full against this offense. If you want to say anything about Dallas, their defense unknown, their offense is pretty good, and obviously, who to you is the main problem for them?
For the Eagles, that's a good question. On defense or just on the whole team?
If you are Jonathan Gannon and you are saying, this is the guy that concerns me the most, who's that guy?
I think it's CeeDee Lamb. Cooper will get Darius Slay. That'll be a good matchup. And certainly Amari Cooper is good enough to take a game over. He's also the kind of player who disappears in games, big games at times, as he's done that before against the Eagles. CeeDee Lamb had 2 touchdowns, 2 receiving, 1 rushing touchdown last year against the Eagles. He's off to a really nice start. He sees a lot of targets. And plus, they use him a lot on the interior. So you're talking about matching him up against the Maddoxes, or just in a zone where he and Dak are in a good rhythm. He can catch a ball in the zone, turn around, break a tackle or so, and move the chain. So I would be worried about him. And Mike, I know everybody is down on the guy, but when he plays the Eagles, he's still a force. Last year, 19 rushes, 105 yards and a touchdown. I personally think the reports of Ezekiel Elliott's demise are a little bit exaggerated. I know he's not what he was 4 years ago when he was averaging 108 per game, but against this Eagles defense, I'd be concerned about Ezekiel Elliott.
Well, yes, and I'm a little interested how they mix Pollard into this as well.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point too. They really do a good job of using him as someone who can outflank you to the edges. He's got good burst, good speed, catches the ball well. These Memphis running backs, man, Gibson, Pollard, Gainwell, right? I mean, they all seem to come into the NFL with the ability to hurt you on the edges and as a pass catcher. And the way that Kellen Moore mixes them up in the offense, I think it's a good compliment. They play good complementary rushing football and catch the ball too.
The Eagles and Cowboys. By the way, the Eagles have lost 3 straight versus NFC East teams. It's their longest division losing streak, going all the way back to 2016 when they lost 4 straight here. Now, Dallas is a 4-point favorite. They are 1-6 against the spread in their last 7 games when favored, but they're 9-2 in their last 11 games when favored against Philadelphia. Going with what happened in the division yesterday, New York lost 0-3, Washington lost. Does this make this game a bigger NFC? I already think it's a pretty big game for Philadelphia considering their schedule coming up. So how important is it that they need to get this one?
Yeah, I think more important for the Eagles than the Cowboys. I mean, just exactly for what you said. You lose, you come home 1-2. You know what it's like when you lose to Dallas. You know what it's like here when you lose 2 in a row. There's going to be a lot of questions about this and that and the quarterback, the defense, the head coach, all of that. And then, as you mentioned, I don't care that Kansas City is 1-2. They're a talented team.
Right.
They come in here and then it doesn't really get a ton easier when you see that the Panthers are undefeated. You see that Las Vegas is undefeated. I think that they probably won't be favored until they play Detroit in, week 7 is that, I think, after the Raiders game. And
Halloween night.
Detroit at least plays hard. Yeah, Detroit plays hard. They lose, but they play hard.
All right, Moshe, obviously Monday night, you guys are getting ready to do your pregame show at 5 o'clock as well. You'll have plenty more on this in the Inside the Birds pregame show, so you can check those guys out as well, getting you ready for this game. How do you see this one kind of working out tonight? It's funny because the game's in Dallas. We really, they don't seem to have this great home field advantage there, so I don't know that playing at Dallas is a huge factor here, but it is on the road for Philadelphia. How do you see it breaking down?
Yeah, I picked the Eagles to win this game.
Wow.
After picking them to lose the first 2, I did pick them to win. Now, that's before the whole Andre Dillard news. It's really tough. If Andre Dillard if this thing doesn't become Winston Justice all over again, then I think the Eagles have a good chance to win this game. I really do. But if that really does them in and the offense in, then I think it could also be a long night. I think it's 2 teams that are always kind of seemingly playing close games. I know it's at Dallas. I just have a feeling, really, that the Eagles are going to win tonight, but it certainly wouldn't surprise me at all if Dallas did.
All right, Geoff Mosher, getting ready for the Inside the Birds pregame show. And, of course, tomorrow we'll break it down here on Football for Andrew DeCecco. Jeff will be back on Wednesday. And, obviously, the Eagles, after tonight, get ready for the Kansas City Chiefs. All right, Moshe, enjoy it, man.
All right, thanks, Mike. Talk to you soon.
All right, he'll be back on Wednesday's show here on the Sports Bash Live. Football at 4, as always, is powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, and it is brought to you by the Caesars Entertainment Group of Atlantic City. Come experience the ultimate sports destinations all season long at Wild Wild West, Tropicana, and Harrah's Atlantic City. Book your game day experience today at Caesars.com. Football at 4 here on the Sports Bash. Most likes the Eagles tonight.